All right, hello and welcome everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank all of you for joining today, wherever you are in the world. My name is Jennifer Morse and I'm with MadCap Software, and I'm so thrilled to also have my colleague, Jorgeo Catolico, also with MadCap Software, here with us today. It is release time, always a fun time of year here at MadCap Software, and today we're here to review the new features in MadCap Flare 2021 and MadCap Central. So we're going to take a look at these features and walk through everything with you. We have a lot to cover today. So before we get started, I just want to remind everybody that this webinar will be recorded. So if you have to leave early for whatever reason, please don't worry. We're going to send everybody a link to this recording when we're done, so not a problem. Also, want to remind you all, as always, there is a question panel in the GoToWebinar console. So if you have questions as we're going along, feel free to drop them in there. At the end of the webinar, we're going to do our best to get to as many as we can live. But if whatever we don't get to live, we'll follow up with a question and answer document for everybody as well. So please use that area to drop in any questions that come up as we're going along. So, all right, we're going to jump right in. We have so much to cover today. I just have, one other quick little slide I want to show. If you've been to my webinars and Geo's webinars in the past, you know we're not big PowerPoint people. We're going to get in the weeds and take a look at Flare today. But I do want to take a look at the agenda and the features that we're going to cover. So what are we talking about? Well, we're going to take a look at the new start page refresh in Flare 2021. Then we're going to talk about Markdown Import. Flare now supports importing native Markdown files into Flare. So we'll take a look at some existing Markdown files and how they get brought in and mapping options, etc. And then we're going to take a look at the new XML layout resizer, which is going to be really handy if you are publishing content on different screen sizes. So we'll take a look at that and why you might want to use it and how you turn it on and off. We've made some PDF enhancements in this release, so we'll talk about those specifically in terms of how PDF is generated and meets accessibility requirements. So we'll take a look at those. And also we'll turn our attention then and we'll take a look at the new features in MadCap Central, specifically the review editor and the ability for subject matter experts and authors to add images in that review editor, which we're really excited about. And we'll also touch on a couple other enhancements that came, not just now, but maybe a month or so ago, just to kind of point out some of the new things that have changed. And then of course at the end, we have a few other minor enhancements that we want to touch on too. So that's our agenda today. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and put PowerPoint away. The first thing I want to take a look at is the Markdown import feature. So I'm going to pull up Flare here. Let's make sure my screen adjusts and you can see it. Looks like GoToWebinar is caught up, so hopefully you can all see Flare on my screen. Feel free to give us a little high sign at any point in time if you can't. But I think the technology is working here, so that's good. Okay, let's talk about the Markdown import. So Markdown, if you don't know, it's a lightweight markup language. Think of it as shorthand for HTML. Okay, it's used widely in the development community, and its main purpose was to make it easier to write content in any text editor without HTML tags getting in the way. So Flare 2021 now supports importing Markdown files that follow the Common Mark specification, which can be really useful if software developers or subject matter experts write content in Markdown and you want to include that information in your Flare project. Now, I actually am going to bring up, before we walk through the import and kind of show you the options that we have, I want to actually show you what Markdown files look like. I have a few here that I've created, and you can spot them right away because they have this Markdown or this MD extension here on them, and I've just created these in a simple text editor here. And so this is what it looks like. You notice we've got some syntax here, and I don't have HTML tags necessarily, but I'm using those common the Markdown syntax to kind of separate out what's happening on the page here. And I wanted to show you these files first before we can bring them in so we can see how Flare handles them. Now, these have a lot of different Markdown elements. They don't have everything in the Common Mark spec, but these examples, I tried to create a little bit of everything in the specification so we can see how they come in. So it's not the be-all end-all in terms of everything that you could write in Markdown, but we can see here I've got a single hashtag that represents a first level heading. Here's 2 hashtags, that's a second level heading. I've got some lists here with some inline or some character formatting. This is how that looks. If we come down here, we can see this is a block quote, so that will come in and we can map those too. I created a table in Common Mark so we can see how that can come in. Here's an example of a definition list constructed in Markdown, so we'll see how those come in. And this guy down here, this is a code block. So we might see that a lot in Markdown files. So those come in as well. So let's take a look at this one. What does this one look like? Well, this has some first and second level headings too, but we've also have some referenced images, so we can see how those come in. And let's take a look at this one here. Here's a Markdown file first level heading, but I've also created an unordered list and a nested list item here. So we can see how Flare handles some of these things. Again, it's not the be all end all. Your Markdown files may have more elements in there, and that's fine, but it was trying to create a little bit of everything to see how Flare can handle these things. All right, so let's take a look. So these are our source Markdown files, okay? And let me put this away. Let's pull up Flare and let's take a look at some options. So we can actually start brand new projects based on a set of Markdown files. So if I were to come up here to the file menu and I go ahead and I say new project, well, you'll notice a new option here for Markdown documents. This is going to start the new project wizard where we can bring in or start a whole new project based on a set of Markdown documents. Or if you have a project already brewing and you want to bring those Markdown files in, well, then we can bring those Markdown files in for you within an existing project. So I'm going to do that. I actually have a project open, so I'm going to practice doing that with you right now. So right up here in the project menu ribbon, there is an import button. We've always had this, but when you select it, you'll notice a new option to bring in Markdown documents. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay. So I'll select that, and it's going to start this import wizard. So it looks similar to the other import wizards that we have, like Microsoft Word. And so here's where we want to import content into a new project. We're not going to do that. We're not going to start the new project wizard. I want to bring these files into my existing project. So this is where we can tell Flare, okay, when we bring in these Markdown files, do we want to drop them into the root content folder? Or do we want to put them in a particular folder in our Content Explorer? So that's what I'm going to do. I'll go ahead and use this little button with the 3 dots. That's going to allow me to select a folder where I want these files to go. I created one called MD Import, stands for Markdown, just so I can keep things tidy. And I'll say okay. And so that's where they're all going to go. Now we can choose to add, you might have multiple folders of Markdown files that you want to bring in, like a bunch of directories of different files. You can add multiple folders in one fell swoop here if you'd like, or you can add individual files and navigate to different folders if you want to pick and choose. I'll go ahead and choose this option. I'll say add file. And I've got those 3 Markdown files. These are the 3 we were just looking at in my text editor. So I'll go ahead and select those 3 here and I'll say open. And here's my list. Now, if I want to, I could change the order of them. Why would I do that? Well, that's going to affect the table of contents that gets created as a result of these Markdown files. Because remember, we saw those headings or those hashes in the Markdown files, and we'll see in a moment that we can tell Flare to break up those long Markdown documents into individual topics. And so a table of contents is going to get created to preserve the order of those things. So we can change the order of them if we want. Now, we don't have to use the table of contents that gets created, of course, and we can certainly restitch things around. But if you wanted to control the order a bit on that table of contents that gets created, you might choose to reorder them, move these documents up and down. But I'll just go ahead and keep them as is. So let's take a look at some of these other options as we bring them in. So let's take a look at the Styles tab. This is going to allow you to associate a project style sheet with these Markdown files when you bring them in. So you can either, leave that blank if you're not sure and apply style sheets later to the topics that come in, or maybe you have a project style sheet that you want to apply to these files, and I do. I'll go ahead and select that button here. So here's my project style sheet. I'll go ahead and say, hey, files, when you come in and get created, I want you to use this particular style sheet here. And I'll go ahead and say open. We have it loaded here. Now we have some choices down here. What's happening? Well, this block section here, actually there's a few others we're going to talk about if we scroll down, but let's start with this block section here. What we're seeing is we're able to now map those Markdown styles to our style sheet styles. Now I'm just going to roll with most of the defaults. I want those first level headings to map to my H1 in my style sheet. I want those second level headings to map to my H2, but depending on what you want, you can certainly choose to map to other styles as well. Down here at the bottom, let's keep going here. So equation blocks in those Markdown files do come in as MadCap equations. Code blocks, so we saw that code block in the Markdown file. We map those automatically by default here to those code snippets. You can certainly map to something else like a pre-tag if you want to, but because Flare now has that code snippet feature, we map those code blocks directly to the MadCap code snippets. Over here on the right, you want to pay attention to this because this is going to allow you to break those long Markdown documents into individual topics. So everybody's Markdown files are going to be a little bit different. You'll know them better than anybody. What I'm telling Flare to do here is every time it comes to one of those first level headings in the Markdown document, I want Flare to break and create a new topic for me. Okay, so that's what I'm saying here. Yours might be a little bit different. If maybe you need to get a bit more granular, you might choose to break and start new topics on heading 2, for example. But I'm just going to start here with heading 1. So that's the block area. Let's take a look down here. This allows us to map how those Markdown lists are going to work in our style sheet. So here I'm just going to roll with the defaults. I want the list items, the unordered list, the ordered list. I want those to map to my LIs, my OLs, and my ULs in my style sheet. Same thing for a definition list. We can choose how we map those. I'm going to just roll with those standard style elements in my style sheet for definition lists. I'm going to keep those the same. And if we take a look down here, this is going to be, well, how's Flare going to handle that inline character mapping within the elements? So I'm just going to keep these the same. Again, you have the option to change these mappings if you want. Okay, so those are the style mapping options that we have. Let's take a look at the advanced options. We'll go to a chance to catch up. So you're seeing what I'm seeing. It looks like you're all caught up. So here we can tell Flare, do we want to create a new style sheet? Do we want to, create a new one and preserve those Markdown styles and keep them in a separate style sheet? So you can keep that checked. You can uncheck it if you want. Again, you don't have to use the style sheet that gets created, but that's a choice that you have. Topics, how do we want to handle those lists that can come in? So if you are creating your list, if your standard is, hey, unordered lists, ordered lists, we always use paragraph list formats. Well, we can tell Flare when we bring those lists in, go ahead and convert those, convert them to paragraph lists. Or maybe you don't. Maybe your lists are simple lists. You can uncheck that box and they'll just be brought in as simple lists. Okay, so I'll choose this one here so we can see. One of mine had the Markdown files that I'm bringing in. We'll take a look at it in a second. It was an unordered list with list items, and it had a nested list. So we'll see how Flare handles that, and it'll have the paragraph list item there because I'm telling it to go ahead and include them here. I'll keep my definition lists as simple lists, though. Here's where we can tell Flare if you want to bring in those resources referenced in those Markdown files like images. So yeah, I want to bring those images in, and this is where we can say, hey, when we bring them in, go ahead and put them in that default project resources folder over here on the left. So by default, this is where images like to hang out in our Content Explorer. So we can say, yeah, go ahead and put them in there. Or maybe we want to bring them in and put them in a specific folder of our choosing over here in the Content Explorer. And that's what this option does. So we could select this radio button and then tell Flare, hey, bring them in, but I want you to put them into this folder, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and keep them to my default images folder over there on the left-hand side in my Content Explorer. Tables, how do we wanna handle those tables in our Markdown files? We can tell Flare, hey, leave them as they are, keep them as just plain tables, and I'll manage them after the fact once they're imported. Or we can tell Flare, yeah, bring them in, and I want you to go ahead and apply a specific table style sheet so that everything looks consistent like the rest of my project. So if I select this option here, this will allow me to browse and choose my table style sheet, and I happen to have one. So I'll go ahead and say I want to use this particular table style sheet to control the look of the tables that come in. And then lastly, down here, we have some options to establish a linking to those source Markdown files. You might think about using this if you know that those Markdown files are maybe continually being updated by somebody else other than you. And so we can establish a linking. Maybe a bunch of engineers are still working on them and you don't want to use Flare as your editor for these files. You want to essentially use Flare as a publishing engine for those files. So you might think about establishing a linking to those source files if you want. And then of course you can choose whether you want to manually re-import them when it's time, or maybe you want to set this up so that it does it automatically when you generate output. What if you've set up some programmatic build process and we just want to take in all of those changes that come in from the Markdown files and publish them out as part of our project. You have those choices to set up the linking here. Now I'm going to just import them. I'm going to sever the ties, but this certainly is an option for you if you think that might be something that works. So those are the settings that I wanted to talk about. Let's go ahead and click finish and we'll get a little preview here. So those 3 Markdown files yielded a number of topics for us and some other files as well. And so you can check them out and preview them. But I like what I'm seeing here, so I'm going to go ahead and click accept, and we'll take a look at all of these things now that they're imported into Flare. So let's go ahead and say accept. Okay, and let's open up that Markdown folder where I brought them in. So here they are. Remember, I wanted them to go into that particular folder, not the root content level. So let's take a look. Let me open up Austin City Limits and we'll take a look at that. So this was, once in that text editor. It looks much nicer here in Flare. There's my first level heading. Remember I said I only wanted to break on heading 1. So that's why we got those 6 topics, because probably across all those 3 Markdown files, I had a total of 6 first level headings. That's why it yielded 6 topics for us. There's that block quote. I don't have it styled to look like much, but it did get wrapped in that block quote tag. There's that table that came in. I associated my table style sheet so it looks like the rest of my tables. Let's scroll down here to the bottom a little bit. Here's that definition list that came in, right? So we can see it's wrapped in the DL tags. There's my term and my definition. Looks fantastic. And there's that code block. So that was something that we mapped to automatically here in terms of our code snippet. So I have that integrated copy button, and it has the syntax highlighting here because the code block in the Markdown file, it was noted as an HTML code block. And so if we bring in those code blocks and the language that's being called out happens to be one of the languages that the code snippet editor supports, well, then you're going to get that automatic syntax highlighting as well. I could certainly come in here, I could right click and I can edit this code snippet further if I'd like. Maybe I need a caption above or below. Maybe I want to put line numbers in. We can do all that. But the nice thing is it automatically comes in, looks great, and it's wrapped in that tag for us so that we can manage it here and in our style sheet. Let's take a look at those attractions. So this is the Markdown file that came in that had those images referenced. So one thing I want to point out with images is that you want to make sure if you're bringing in Markdown files with images that they're in the same directory as those Markdown files that you're bringing in. Flare has to see them. So just something to be mindful of. So those images were in the directory that I was pointing to bring them in. So there's the image that came in and they put themselves here in the images folder. So we've got the Capitol image, and then here's Zilker Park down here, and there's Ladybird Lake. Okay, so those were just added to the project as a result of the import. Last one I want to show, just as an example, I want to take a look at that long list that we had. So that's this one here. So we can see that list came in and mapped beautifully. It was an unordered list, and I told Flare on the import, hey, I want you to make it a paragraph list. So you can see that we've got those paragraph tags in there. If I had said, hey, keep it as a simple list, you would only see UL and then LI. You wouldn't see those P tags there automatically. And here's an example of how that nested list came over as well, which was how it was constructed in that Markdown document. So lots of interesting options here if you have to repurpose Markdown files that are coming from subject matter experts or developers, and some pretty cool options for mapping the styles and breaking them up into individual topics here in Flare. And one thing I wanted to mention, and I kind of breezed over it, apologies, I just want to go back. Just a real quick, you might have noticed this is one of the items in the agenda that I forgot to mention. I just want to make quick mention of this Redesign start page. So you'll notice when you first launch Flare, we didn't really add anything new here in terms of the recent files and the resources, but we wanted to kind of re-merchandise things a little bit to make it a bit more intuitive and easier to use. So you'll notice when you first launch that we've separated out all of your project files here. You can still, type in the name of the project to filter if you've got a lot of projects. But then the resources, marketing messaging, training resources, access to the online help, those are separated into their own area here. And then of course we can use this to open up a new project, or we can also start the new project wizard right here from the start page. You'll notice these banners show up too at the top once you start getting towards the end of a trial or your maintenance or subscription. This banner will show up actually starting at about 90 days prior to the expiration, just so that you know when things need to come up for renewal. Maybe you need to plan a little bit. And within about 30 days, I think, of that expiration, you'll see this little widget show up, which tells you how many days you have remaining, starting at about 30 days out. So you might notice this difference too when you launch this new version. So that's what I wanted to mention on the start page. Again, it looks a little bit different than what we've seen in the past. All right, so moving on, the next thing I want to talk about, let me close up some of these tabs just to keep things tidy here. I want to move on and I want to talk a little bit about the layout resizer, the new XML editor layout resizer. So this feature is great if you're creating and designing content for different screen sizes, like web delivery, mobile delivery, or maybe you're delivering content embedded in an app where you've got limited real estate to display your topics. And maybe you're using media queries in your style sheet to control how topic content will look in these different sizes. Now, if you're not familiar with media queries and what they are, they're an alternate group of settings in a style sheet. And these settings are automatically used under certain conditions, like a smaller screen size when that's detected, like a mobile phone or a tablet, for example, that's displaying this output. So when the criteria is met, these style settings in the media query kick in, and they're used to display the output. And it's cool because it just happens automatically. You don't have to tell Flare to do it. This new layout resizer makes it very easy to experiment with different breakpoints or media queries in your topic, and then quickly create new media queries in your style sheet if you need something other than the two out-of-the-box breakpoints and media queries that Flare provides. So let's go ahead and open up a topic. We'll take a look at this, see what this all is about. I'm going to open up my topic called home here. So I've got some content. I actually have, just a basic paragraph, and this is actually a responsive layout. So this is a two-celled layout that looks this way in web, and as we'll see here, as we shrink it down, we're going to see these two tiles sort of stack on top of one another. So the whole idea with responsiveness is when we look at content on these smaller screen sizes, particularly on a device, right? We don't want to use our thumb and our index finger to navigate around on the page. So responsive layouts are great. I actually have a couple here to see, just so we can see how this layout resizer works, not only with text, simple text, but also with responsive layouts too. So let's have a look here. Let me create some extra real estate. Speaking of real estate, let me turn this off so we can see. So the layout resizer, it might not be something that you use all the time, but when you're designing content for these different screen sizes and formatting your topic layouts, it's going to come in handy. In fact, this layout resizer is turned off by default. To turn it on, what you're going to do is come down here to the very bottom of your editor toolbar. There's a new button in 2021. And if I hover, hopefully you can see it. It says toggle layout resizer. I'll go ahead and select it to turn on this layout resizer, and you'll see this gray slider in this bar show up at the top. Okay, so that's how we turn it on. You might also choose, if you're going to be using this layout resizer, you might also choose to turn on your ruler in your editor. So this is down here. Let me go ahead and show you down here. It's another option in the editor. Some people choose to have their rulers on all the time. Everybody's a little bit different in terms of how they configure their editing environment, but you might choose to turn your ruler on when I've just toggled it on here. And the reason why is that this layout resizer, these units of measurement, they work in tandem with one another. So it's sometimes helpful to have them both on just so you can see some reference here in terms of numbers. Okay, so I'm going to choose to keep my ruler on here. So as I mentioned, Flare provides two media queries that are baked in. One is tablet, one is mobile, and those widths are set in the target. And the little rectangles here that we see, so there's a rectangle here, here's another one in the resizer. Those represent the two built-in breakpoints. And as we'll see in a minute, we'll see additional rectangles appear, and those are going to represent custom media queries that you choose to add. So here, tablet's somewhere around 1279 pixels. We got mobile here somewhere around 767 pixels or so. And so those are, again, you don't have to do anything. Those are just out of the box, okay? And you'll notice that when you click on this resizer, you'll notice this little blue thumb. This is going to allow us to experiment with different ones. So watch what happens when I click this out of the box breakpoint. I'll go ahead and click it here, and we'll notice my content shifted a little bit and my font changed. That's because I'm now looking at the mobile media query, and the font changed because I told my style sheet, hey, when that smaller width is detected, I want certain style overrides to come into play. Okay, so that's why that font turned green. It's a style override for this mobile media query in my style sheet. What if we need something smaller than that out of the box breakpoint? Well, I could use this little icon here. I can click and I can drag. You see it's kind of gray. And if I come down, what if we need something around, 350 pixels? What if we're displaying content in a much smaller screen size? I can click here and you'll notice it turns to this little blue thumb. That's sort of a temporary position, and we can see that smaller width show up, and we can experiment and see, well, how is the topic going to look? Maybe 350, maybe 400. Nothing set in stone here. And by the way, I want to point out, over here on the right-hand side, we see this text box. So if we know, say we have to be extremely specific, and we know we've got 350 pixels, that's it. I can even come over here and type in my number specifically, and that little thumb is going to snap directly into place. So if we can't get it right on the number we need, we can use this little box over here to put in the number explicitly. We can also adjust the units of measurement here. Oh, I clicked it and it's on my other monitor. We can't see. I have it set to pixels, but we could change this to points, centimeters, inches, or ems. Okay, so that's what this one's going to do. I have it set to pixels, that's just the default here in mine, but you can adjust that to the different units of measurement that the ruler supports. And again, the ruler will change too, and they'll work in tandem. All right, so we're back here. We're just experimenting, nothing set in stone with that little blue thumb there. But what if we decide, you know what, this is good. This is what we want. So what I can do is I don't have to leave my topic now, go to my style sheet, create the new media query, set the settings, build everything, and so on. I can go ahead and I can just create the new media query right here. So if we like what we see, if that's our breakpoint, I can use these little 3 dots, okay, and I can choose Add New Media Query. And this dialog comes up with all of these settings in it. And you can choose which style sheet where it will be created here. So I only have one in my project, so I'll just keep it. But if you had more than one style sheet in your project, you can choose which style sheet where this media query will be created. But I'm just going to kind of roll with this. I only have the one. I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And we'll notice that this changed a little bit. We have another gray rectangle there. So that's representing this new media query that we've just created. So there it is. Now what? Well, I can go into my style sheet that Flare opened, and I can adjust the styles for this smaller width. Okay, so let's take a look. Flare opened up that style sheet for me, which was kind of nice. So here it is. And we'll go ahead and take a look. Let me wait for GoToWebinar to catch up. There we go. And when I open up my style sheet, you can see I've got some media queries open here to compare. I've got the default one here. This is my web one. I have my mobile media query. Let me open up my font because that's where I made the change. And now you can see this new one. This is the one we've just created. Didn't think about it. Just using that sizer, we created that new media query on the fly, and it shows up here as an option for us. Okay. So this is that style sheet override I made for the mobile. Remember when I snapped it down, that font color changed? Well, that's where this is coming from. And with this new media query here in my style sheet, I can make additional overrides if I want. So perhaps I want to make it a different color. So I'll go ahead and choose something really kind of bright so we can see the change. I'll choose blue perhaps. And maybe I need that font to be slightly smaller, right? Because we have a much smaller real estate to display. Maybe I'll scale it down to 10 points, okay? Let me click out of that, and we can see color changed a little bit smaller. When I save the change to this new media query that we created and I go back to my topic, we'll notice that those style properties are now there, right? So we're here at that breakpoint that we created, that 350. So anything below that is where these style changes that I've just made in my style sheet are going to override. My text changed to blue. We can see that it got a little bit smaller here because I specified those in my style sheet. So this criteria was met, much smaller width. Those style changes are going to kick in. Okay, so super helpful, not only for the basic text changes, but also how your responsive layouts that you create will look in these different widths. We can see this still looks great. These 2 tiles are stacked on top of one another. but I'm able to quickly create those style changes to meet the needs of that much smaller real estate. So again, when you're done experimenting, you might choose to go back to your regular web layout if you want. Notice that still shows up as an additional breakpoint for us. And if you don't want to keep that on all the time, because again, you might not want to, you can if you want, but if you're done experimenting and you think that feels a little distracting or I don't know why it's up there, you can always come down here and turn it off if you'd like. Okay. So that's how we turn that on and off. Again, it will be off by default. So if you need to turn it on, just come down here to the bottom toolbar and choose to turn on that resizer. Okay. All right, let's talk a little bit about the next thing, which are the improvements that we've made to our PDF output to support PDF UA accessibility. Okay, so in Flare 2021, you can build your PDF targets to generate a tagged document that is PDF UA compliant. UA stands for Universal Accessibility. PDF UA, it's also an ISO standard that enhances the readability of a document for people with disabilities. PDF documents have to meet certain criteria regarding these tags used because some users rely on these tags in PDF for reading and navigation. And many of the changes that have been made to meet this are happening behind the scenes, by the way. So the good thing is you don't really have to think about it. If accessibility is important to you for your PDF outputs, we're going to take a look at this setting here in a second. What's nice is that a lot of the things that we've enhanced are just taken care of for you. So now if you generate a PDF in Flare 2021 and you run it through any third-party accessibility checker, you're not going to see the same issues that you saw in PDFs generated in previous versions. So we took care of a lot of those things by default. So let's take a look. Let me go ahead and open up a PDF target here. And we'll take a look at that setting that I'm mentioning. So let me open up this PDF. And down here, so in the PDF options in our target, you'll notice this PDF tagging option. So this is checked, and that's actually checked by default. It's going to generate a tagged PDF for a tagged document for PDF UA. So if you don't need this, if you don't want this, you can always uncheck it, of course. We did have this before, but it wasn't PDF UA. So this is going to take care of some of those things behind the scenes, if I mentioned that I mentioned. So with that selected, a lot of those things you don't even think about, and it's going to help enable that successful scan if you were to run it through any kind of third-party accessibility checker. However, there are some things you can do as the author to mitigate other accessibility needs, like using alt text, making sure your tables have header cells and captions. You can apply language attributes to your content. So those are things you can do as an author, which Flare has always had, to make sure you're writing for accessibility. But we actually added a couple UI elements to take that a step further to ensure that it really is accessible. And that has to do with alt text. That's really important when you're writing for accessibility in these guidelines. In Flare 2021, you're going to see new alt text fields in certain places that only had things like a screen tip before. So if we go back to our topic, I'll show you what I mean. Let me go back to home here. If I kind of highlight a text, let's say I'm going to insert a link. Okay, so if I come in here and I want to insert a hyperlink, you'll notice we used to only have this screen tip field. Well, now we've added this alternate text field. So if you have to be mindful of these guidelines, when you're inserting your links, you want to make sure you're using alternate text. So this is something you can do as an author. Same thing with cross-references. If I come up here and I need to insert a cross-reference, again, we used to just have that screen tip, but now you'll see this new field here for using alternate text in your links. Also, if you wanted to insert multimedia, if I come up here to the insert ribbon and I go to insert multimedia, again, we used to just have that screen tip, but to meet those certain accessibility guidelines, we've added this new alternate text here. So these alternate text fields, this can help not only for PDF, but for online delivery as well. So those are UI elements that were added in this version to support that, okay? So again, much of that's happening behind the scenes, but again, some enhancements made to make it easier for you as an author to comply with these accessibility standards if that's something that you need to do. Okay, so with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually turn it over to my colleague Gio. We're going to turn our attention a little bit and we're going to take a look at the features that have been added into Central in this new version. So Gio, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jen. Yeah, that was great. I'm just trying to make myself presenter here. All right, so we'll go ahead and segue into showing you all the enhancements that we recently added to MadCap Central, which is our cloud-based solution that works alongside Flare and adds additional functionality such as source control, task management, hosting, analytics, and a subject matter expert review workflow, which was the main focus for this central release. So I'd like to go ahead and share my screen here. Oops, let me share my other screen. All right, and I'd like to bring up a high-level overview of what the central review workflow looks like. Now, to save us a bit of time, we'll be skipping the first 3 steps of this workflow, and we'll jump to this stage of the workflow where the subject matter expert reviewer reviews a topic file that was sent from the Flare author. So let's jump into MadCap Central in the browser. And I've logged in as a subject matter expert, which is why reviews is all the functionality that I have here on the left side. And I also have this topic that was sent to me by a Flare author here in my pending column, which is my attractions.htm topic. So let's open that topic in the lightweight review editor. And now that we have this topic open, you'll notice in the top toolbar that we have, all the way to the right side, there's going to be a new Insert Images icon within this editor. So now the SME can insert images from their machine. So let's see what that looks like. I'll select where we want to put this image. So I'll just select right after this heading here. And then from the toolbar, I will select this Insert Images icon. And then I will select this capital.jpg image that I have here on my desktop. But before we select open to insert this image, I'd like to show what kind of images that we could insert into Central. So the images that we do support are JPEG, PNGs, GIFs, BMPs, and TIFF images, and lastly, SVG images as well. But I'll be selecting this capital.jpg image. So once I have that selected, I'll press open. And then my image is going to get inserted into this editor. So let's insert another one of our images here under Zilker Park. We'll do that again. So I'll select Insert Image. And then I'll select my Zilker Park image. Press open. And then that's going to get inserted. And you'll also notice that there are some track changes added to record those edits that we made as a subject matter expert so that the Flare author knows who made what changes. Going back up into this toolbar, you will also notice that there's another button next to this insert image icon here, which will allow the SMEs to insert tables. So we put out this feature a little prior to this release, but I thought I'd like to mention it anyways. SMEs can now add new tables, and they could even pick out the rows, the columns, and the dimensions for that new table. You could also modify existing tables now by adding new rows and deleting rows and columns that aren't needed. So let's insert a new table here. I'll just insert it under this text. I'll select Insert Table. And then we could select which dimensions or what dimensions we want for this table. So I'll just insert a simple 2x1 table here. And now that we have our table inserted, we could then fill these cells with content. So I'll just put Austin in one cell, Texas in the other. And then if we right click on the table, we could then modify it. So we could add new rows above or below. We could insert columns to the left or to the right. And we could delete those columns and those rows that we don't need as well. So I'll click out of this. And now that we're done editing this topic, we've inserted all of our images that we want our Flare author to receive. We've inserted that new table as well. Let's then submit this back to the Flare author by hitting the Submit button. So I'll go ahead and now jump from Central back into MadCap Flare. So I've brought up my Flare project. I'll see that review file that was sent back to me added into my inbox. I've opened it up here. As you can see, it says reviewed topic. And now it's up to me as the Flare author to then go ahead and accept or reject all of these changes from my subject matter expert. So I'll go through this topic here. I'll go through each change. So I'll see this new image that was added. Great, I'll accept that one. I will see this new table that was added as well. I'll accept that one. And I will accept that new Zilker Park image. And then once we're done going through all of these changes, once we think that this topic looks good, I will accept the file. And then once we accept the file, Flare will then let me know that it's going to copy in those new images into my project. So that's what we want. So we'll select OK. And that concludes the review process. So I will go into my Content Explorer. Let's check out that topic. And I'll see those new images from Central and that table as well. Now I'll go back into my Content Explorer and then I'll expand my resources folder. And any images that do come over, those will get saved under our images folder under the resources. And if we don't have an images folder here, then Flare will actually create that images folder for us and then put those new images in here. Now, in the situation where there was already an image in our project with the same name as an image that was coming from a SME, so let's say for our Ladybird Lake image, this was already in our project prior to sending those files out for review. Now, if a subject matter expert happened to submit an image with the same name, in that situation, after we accept the review file, Flare will actually open a conflict resolution wizard that will allow us to select which image we want to use. If we want to use the existing image in our project, so that Ladybird Lake image, or if we want to use the new one from our SME. Now, if we do use that new one, we could rename the image so that we could save it in our images folder, or we can redirect the new image to a different folder in our project so that it doesn't overwrite the existing one that we already had. But by default, all of those new images will get copied here into our images folder. So those are the central enhancements that we made. Wanted to give your subject matter experts some more functionality and streamline that review workflow. Some additional enhancements that we made in this release are PDF kerning improvements. This one was a highly requested feature request by our users, so you'll notice some improvement to the letter spacing and kerning for PDF outputs. For those that need to migrate content over from FrameMaker, we now have the support of import of FrameMaker 2020 projects, and we also redesigned the table style sheet editor. So I'll jump back into Flare to show you what that looks like, but I'll actually jump into Flare 2020 R3, which was the previous version. And this is how our table style sheets used to look before. When you open up the table style sheet in the editor, the preview was hiding the rest of the settings behind it. So we had to drag the preview down to see the rest of these settings. But you're sort of compromising the preview to edit your style sheet. So to improve the user experience while working in these table style sheets, this is what our table style sheets now look like in Flare 2020-21. The settings are now shown on the left side, and the preview is going to be on the right so that we have an easier time seeing what the table looks like as we add our styles. And nothing is going to be hidden anymore. So that covers all of the new features and enhancements that we made to this 2021 release. I hope that you all get the chance to download the new version and try it out.
Great, thanks, Gio. And I know we've got some questions that have come in. So again, if you're seeing some of these things and you want to drop in a question, please don't be shy. We're going to do our best to get to as many as we can live. Keep them coming. For those of you who don't have a current maintenance or subscription and you're interested in upgrading to Flare 2021, you can upgrade and save. So if you have questions about it, or if you would like a quote, please reach out to your sales rep or drop us an email at sales@madcapsoftware.com. And they're happy to answer any questions about the upgrade path for you. One other thing I want to mention before we get to some of the questions here, just as a reminder to everybody, October of this year, we are going to have our Mad World User Conference. And so we'll just go ahead and take a look at that. So just as a reminder, it's going to be October 3rd through the 6th. It will be in Austin, Texas, which we're really excited about. We have an amazing panel of speakers lined up and sessions. We also just announced an online option, a virtual option called Mad World at Home. So quite hopeful that by October things are going to look a little bit different in our world, but we realize maybe that's not for everybody. We understand that. So we do have a virtual option where you can register for the main conference and attend live. So pop over to our website to take a look at both options and see what works for you. I mean, we hope to see you in person. It's just, it's just a great experience to be there in person, of course, and you get the benefit of the technical support lounge and lots of safety precautions will be taken, not to worry, but again, we realize not everybody can attend live. So we hope that one of these options will work for you. So go ahead and if you pop over to our website, you'll see the different sessions and the options available to you. The other thing I want to mention, we're going to turn our attention to the questions. I know we covered these things in high level. We didn't have a chance to get into all of the features in Flare, like how responsive layouts work, all the other things that MadCap Central can do, like output analytics and more on the review process and source control and all those fun things. I'm going to be actually launching a survey here while we talk about the questions. If anybody is interested in getting a private demo or want to schedule a call with our team to talk about these features in more detail and how they may help you, or if you have questions about it conceptually, feel free to go ahead and participate in the survey, and we'll contact you to set something up. So let me go ahead and launch that now so you can see it. And it's hidden for me here. I'll go ahead and launch this for you. So if you would like somebody to contact you to walk through various features, or you want to take a deeper look at responsive layouts and how they work, or maybe you want to talk a little bit more in more detail about MadCap Central, then please feel free to use this survey, and we will follow up with you directly after the presentation. So with that, Gio, we've got some questions. I'm gonna go ahead and keep that survey up. I hope you can all see that there. If you can't, well, let me know. Oh, it looks like, can you see that, Gio? It's hard to know. It's hard to see what's, looks like it's, oh, it looks like it's happening. That's great. First, yeah, never used one of these surveys before, so first for me. It looks like that's working. That's great. All right, let's take a look. We've got some questions that have come in, and so it looks like we've got some great comments for the table style sheet editor redesign. I agree. Thanks for the high fives on that one, everybody, because I think it's a wonderful feature that we've added, a nice enhancement. Let's take a look at some of these questions. So a question came in: when you're looking at the layout resizer and the ruler, can you specify the units of measurement? And that's a great question, and I did that a little bit quickly. So just to reiterate, yes, you can. You can specify the difference of units of measurement for the ruler and the resizer, and whatever units of measurement you choose, the two will work in tandem. And you can do that a couple ways. You can right-click on the ruler that you've got open, and those units of measurement will come up for you. You can also do it in the layout resizer as well. And so again, they will work in tandem. Couple other questions that have come in.
Oh, I think I see a good one, Jen.
Okay, perfect.
When the SME adds a table in Central, can they specify a header or footer row? At this time, the SMEs can only insert regular rows and columns. So for those headers and footer rows, those are going to be inserted by the Flare author when the topic is back in Flare. And the Flare author will also be the one that's going to add a table style sheet or style the table further. Great question.
Okay. Yeah, very good question. Another great question: can SMEs hide change tracking? So that's a good question. At this time, no. It's the change tracking is on in the review editor by default. That's actually by design. We're trying to simplify it so that SMEs don't have to think about turning on track changes like you would in a Word document, for example. We wanted to have that functionality on. Plus, it makes it easy to have different subject matter experts who are invited to review the file, see what the other changes are that other SMEs have added. So that track changes is actually turned on, and there's no way to turn it off. That's by design. Okay, let's take a look at some of these other questions here. So here's a good question. I don't know if you want to take this one, Gio. So the question is, so this is when you were talking about bringing the images in from the review workflow that the SME adds. Can we merge and use both images?
That's a great question. So as of right now, you do have to select either the new image or the existing image to get inserted into your topic. However, you can keep both images in your project, and then after you accept the file, you could then insert both images into the topic.
Perfect. Great. Here's a really good question. Now, I understand the importance of alt text with graphics, but I don't understand the alt text with hyperlinks or cross-references. Can you give an example of how it helps someone using a screen reader? Well, having the alt text there for links, cross-references, multimedia, it can help describe that actual file or that link that they're jumping to. So if you're using a screen reader and you have alt text in a link, maybe the alt text says link to madcapsoftware.com because you're hyperlinking the text to madcapsoftware.com, just as an example. Having the alt text there means the screen reader will call that out for the person with the visual impairment who's using the screen reader. So it's one of those things that's required by Section 508 and the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And so that's why that's been added to aid with that compliance if that's something that you have to be mindful of for your viewership. Okay, here's a great question on the upgrade path, and I'd like to throw this out because this can sometimes be confusing. So great question. Can I upgrade from any new version? Are they cumulative? I haven't upgraded for a couple of versions, so don't know what to do. So here's the thing with Flare 2021. It's a whole new version. So yes, you can just upgrade if you have it, or if you're trying it out, you can download Flare 2021 on your machine. It's not going to install on top of any prior version. So you would have Flare 2021 and whatever other versions that you have on your machine. So we leave the uninstalling of old versions up to you because it's a whole new version. But the upgrade is cumulative. So you could, if you wanted to, you could, if it makes you feel comfortable, you could make a copy of your project that was from the prior version a couple versions ago, open it in Flare 21, run some tests and see if everything looks okay to you, and then, sever the ties from the old one and keep using 2021 going forward. But yeah, you can go ahead and upgrade from older versions to the new one. So go ahead, Gio.
Oh, here's another one. Can you copy and paste images into that central review editor? So as of right now, you do have to go through the toolbar and select insert images into insert graphics into central review. We can't copy and paste it in.
Sounds like a great feature suggestion.
Oh yeah.
Well, we'll make sure we note that one down. Here's another fantastic question that's come in. So I want to repeat it for the audience. When importing Word docs, and I'll just kind of throw in, and other files, maybe Markdown or Excel or whatever, is there an option to save the import settings like the style mappings, etc.? Yes, 100% yes. In fact, and I didn't show it, but when you bring in the Markdown documents, Flare actually created an import file. So for those files that we can import, like Word documents, Markdown documents, Confluence, those create import files. And those import files represent a set of settings so that we don't have to always remember what we did if we need to import subsequent documents of the same type. So yes, those import files are quite handy. They save those import rules that they created. So if we need to go back and add you know, if you go to your Word import file and you need to add subsequent Word files of the same type, let's say, and you don't have to worry about remembering what all those style map settings are, you can just add those documents to the import file and do a re-import. You're not going to get, you know, duplicate content there. You're just going to get all of that new stuff that's come in with all of those choices that you made saved and applied to the new files that have come in. A good question. Okay.
For Markdown, can those Markdown files come from different directories? So yes. So when you in a single import instance, those Markdown files can come from different folders and directories on your machine.
Perfect. Okay, so a question came in. When accepting images from a review and adding it to the image folder, does it just enter it to the image folder level, or can you specify subfolders within it? So at this time, if the image is brand new, it does go into that images folder by default. You can then move it if you want to, but it's going to go into that default resources images folder in the Content Explorer. Okay, so let's take a look. We have a couple others coming in. Let's check our time. I think we're okay here. We've got a few minutes. We can, all right, so a question came in on the review workflow. Can subject matter experts create a new topic? In MadCap Central, no, it's more of a hub and spoke model. So the Flare author is responsible for initiating the reviews and inviting those SMEs to review their topics pre-publish in the review editor.
Here's another one. If we make changes to an imported Markdown file and then re-import, are those changes lost in Flare? So yeah, those changes made to the topic from the original import will be lost if we do re-import. However, we can choose to sever that link to the Markdown file so that changes won't be overwritten. So you'll be editing just in Flare for those imported topics.
That's a great one. And then just as a follow-up to that previous, for the question right before you, Gio, about adding a new topic, just to kind of clarify, another question came in related to that. But can I create a blank topic that an SME can populate? And thanks for asking that. Yes. So if you just created a blank topic, for example, you could send that out to SMEs for review. You know, it's not like it has to be completely populated. Yes, you could send out a blank one, but that it's going to initiate from you as the author. So thank you for clarifying. That's a really good question and a really good point. So thanks so much. So a question came in, what are some of the benefits to reviewing in Central and not in Contributor? Well, that's an interesting question. And so, you know, one of the things with Contributor, and I don't want to, you know, sometimes, you know, you got to kind of evaluate what's going to work for you. One of the things with Contributor is that, you know, we designed it to be somewhat easy to use. It doesn't have all of the power of Flare. It was sometimes tricky to get subject matter experts to install a piece of software. And we found this, you know, just from experience. And so again, Contributor is kind of like a Flare Lite, right? It's got the Flare editor. It doesn't have all the power of Flare, but subject matter experts still have to install it on their machine, and they have to learn a new interface. And even though we try to design it to be as easy to use as possible, you know, it's not a Microsoft Word, it's not a PDF, and oftentimes that's what subject matter experts are used to. So what we did is we still offer Contributor, but with Central, you have the benefit of it being web-based. Nobody has to install anything, and they're reviewing content in an extremely simple, easy to use, lightweight editor, and it's that way on purpose, right? We don't want to complicate the editing environment for our subject matter experts with, you know, XML tags and other things that the Flare editor might show. We really want the SMEs to focus on content and, you know, quickly getting comments back, for example. And so we keep the power of Flare as a desktop tool for the content authors, and we wanted to pair it with this really easy to use, lightweight, web-based editor that makes it easy for SMEs to get in there, no install necessary, quickly see the review, the files that they're asked to review in a really easy to use editor. So that's kind of the difference. Oh, and the other thing too is with Contributor, and same thing with if you were using Word for reviews or PDF for reviews, it's a little bit tricky to have multiple people in there at the same time. Maybe you have multiple subject matter experts that need to review the file. And so you kind of had to daisy chain files around the table. If reviewer B wants to see what reviewer A did, well, you have to send that file to that person. A little bit different in Central since it's web-based. We can have multiple SMEs reviewing that file at the same time. Nobody's going to step on anybody's toes, though, because all of those changes are going to be tracked. So we can invite multiple people to review that document simultaneously. So that's some of the differences, but for some people, contributor works great for them. They want to use it that way, and that's fine too. The good news is you have two choices, two integrated choices to do reviews with your Flare content. So great question there. So let's take a look. We have some time for a couple of other questions here. So a question came in, just to kind of repeat, lots of questions come in. Can I have a recorded version of this webinar? Yes, we have recorded this and we'll be sending this out to everybody that's attended. So not to worry, we will send out a link to the recording. So a question came in on the review. Can a whole book or a chapter be sent to an SME for review? Yeah, actually you can. We just had one there to show this review editor, but you could certainly send multiple topics for review. Yeah, so you just want to be a little bit mindful, right? Could you send a whole chapter? You could, but if your chapter has 100 topics in there, you might have some unhappy SMEs. I think that with reviews, I think the shorter chunks of content that you can send for reviews, you'll probably have happier SMEs. Might be a little bit easier to digest that content if you're just sending them the specific topics, but you certainly could, that's one of the things we didn't have time to show today. We can certainly follow with you if you want to see, but when we send those topics out for review, yes, we can add additional files to be sent out for that particular review lifecycle. Question came in, can contributor installations share an instance? Well, because it's installed on the desktop, I guess the answer is sort of yes and no. Contributor is often used as a floating license, so this isn't really, it's not shared like it's shared like in a web-based editor. So while the license of contributor could be shared, if it's a floating license, meaning you could take that floating license of contributor, let's say you have a single floating license of contributor, that license can be activated on 100 machines within your organization. Right, it's floating. But because it's a single floating license among all the machines that has it activated, only one instance of contributor can be running at one time. But that means that the changes that you made, they still have to be saved and sent to other contributor users. So you can't be in there at the same time like you can in a web-based editor. Oh, yeah, so to clarify it with Central content. So yeah, if we're using Central for reviews, that's the benefit. If we invite multiple subject matter experts to review a particular file, then yes, they can all see what's happening at the same time in the web browser. Also, when you have that, when you've got that central workflow, all of the SMEs, when they log in to see the review, they're going to see all of those edits and those comments happening real time. So everybody can kind of see what's happening at the same time. We don't have to wait and receive a file to see what another reviewer has done. So it's a great way for subject matter experts to collaborate a bit more real time on your content pre-publish. All right, I'm looking at the time. We're 2 minutes over, everybody. Sorry about that. Just want to thank everybody for coming, and I want to thank you for your fantastic questions. And thank you for being so engaged. This was great. As a reminder, we're going to be sending out the question and answer document, and we'll be sending out a link to the recording. So again, I want to thank everybody for joining. Thanks so much, Gio, for joining me today. And again, if you filled out that survey, we certainly appreciate it. Look for some follow-up from the MadCap team, and we'll be setting up some time to talk through additional things with you. So thanks everybody for joining. We hope you have a wonderful rest of the week. Hope we can see you at MadWorld in some fashion, of course, in person, of course, but if you can't make it live, we hope that the virtual option can work for you. But of course, we would love to see all of you in person because that would be so fun. There's nothing like it. So thanks everybody so much. Have a great rest of the week, and we hope to see you on another webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Gio.